lot of you might be wondering, why is a 21-year-old up here talking to you about finances? He doesn't know anything. Well, the one thing I do know, and I've learned in my 21 years, especially the past 2-3 years, is that the only way that you're going to be able to succeed in life is by faith. And the only way you're going to really be able to provide for a family one day and really be on track is through discipline and wisdom. And along with that comes faith. And a lot of that all correlates together. There's discipline, there's wisdom, and there's faith. Now, a lot of people just think that it's all faith. Well, a lot of people would disagree with that because people who've tried just faith, they have there's blind faith and there's stupid faith, I think, honestly. Because stupid faith would say, well, I'm going to give my whole year's paycheck away. When who's going to really pay for that? You know what I mean? Faith is not doing something because you want something out of return for it. It's doing it because you want to plant a seed in the ground. There's wisdom in faith too, because God gives wisdom to everybody God will give wisdom to anyone who asks of it. That's what the Bible says. And for me, it's been a journey of faith, wisdom, and diligence. Those three things have been key factors in my life. I've learned a ton from a few of the men in this church. PK, Pastor Keith, is one of the most financially sound, most wise individuals in this church. If you have financial problems and you're young, you should go to him and talk to him. He'll straighten your life out. He's a very wise man. Mike Teed, he's been a great person for me to learn from. And the Bible talks about surrounding yourself with people who will build you up, always. And the Bible says also learn from the older, wiser men. Older is not meant to be offensive, Mike. Don't worry. He's 30. Yeah, he's 30. Looks it. New 30, yeah. But the Bible talks about learning. The Bible talks about learning from the elderly, the older people who are wiser, because years make you wiser, you know. I don't know as much about life as Jake Tinker, who's 25. You know, I've learned a lot from him. So this is just a message, too, to anybody who is in a younger place, you know, 20s and 20 years old, you know what I mean, my age, if anybody's in here, I don't know if there are. But this can apply to anyone, I think, too. If you're 40, 50, you can apply to you. Because there's certain gifts in the spirit realm. And I think with 100% honesty that there's a gifting of financial blessing on people's lives. And it's even a mantle that some people carry because anytime they're walking, you see the blessing that they're walking in. They don't take one step without financial blessing here. And whenever they are not in the financial blessing that we think it is, God comes 100-fold the next time that they're going around. He always is a faithful God because always, you know, always a faithful God. And one of the biggest things that I've been dealing with the past 2 months is with a business is you have people counting on you to pay them weekly, you know, and it's been a big thing for me. And a big thing has been trusting God in every step. And when I trust in God, I don't have to worry. And I could lose a huge account and have complete peace. Because if you're in peace, then you're going forward, and God's plan is ever straight, ever winding upward. And a big thing I've learned is diligence is key to successfulness in Christ in anything that you're doing. If you're on the worship team and you are half-heartedly doing stuff, then that can hold back the worship team from entering into a place of success and the Spirit coming down every Sunday. And it's the same with finances. If you're in a business and or even an employee to a job and you're going to work, boss isn't watching right now. I'm okay, you know, like I'm gonna do something half-heartedly, you know, skip this and that. Then God's not gonna follow through with the blessing because it's on you as the person to be diligent. We should be the best workers in our jobs everywhere. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. And the biggest thing that I've learned is diligence is key. And we came into a really rough spot in our business a couple months ago, and it was when who was it, KJ? I think is a huge testimony. It was like that week that we just went to a really rough time, and then KJ comes up and says, you know, I went through this rough time, and God told me to give. I was like, thanks, God. Thanks, KJ. And that week, I just felt led to just give something to the church, and we did that. And ever since I've sown that seed, I've been praying about it. I've been praying about it, seeking God after it, saying, Lord, I planted the seed here. I'm going to be diligent in every step I take. So God, you be the person that waters it. It's just like in evangelism, when we go out and we talk to people, our job is not to bring that person full circle to become a Christian. Our job is to sow a seed, and God waters it, and he brings the increase. It's the same exact principle with finances. If you sow a seed, then he is going to bring the increase. It's not up to you. Your job, though, is to sow it in faith, be diligent, and be wise. There's three things. It's not be faithful, like have faith and do it. No, there's three parts of it that I think Christians forget. And then when they don't get the blessing, they're like, what the heck? I'm not going to do that again. You know what I mean? It's about being diligent, being wise, and being faithful with everything that you do in your life. And for right now, I've seen the Lord just working in the past, it's been 2 weeks, I think. The past 2 weeks, he's just been working with new opportunities for our business, new opportunities for me, for everything. And it's ever winding upward, because don't let anybody ever tell you that when you're going through a trial is from God, because that is a complete lie. Because the Bible promises trials, because if you're doing good, the devil is going to come at you 10 times harder. He's going to come at you 10 times harder. So when you're in a trial, just know I'm in a trial because I'm actually probably doing something pretty good. And so I'm going to keep going ever winding upward. Don't ever take the lie that trials are good, because they're not. They're not. They build character, though, because if you go through a trial from the devil and you come out even stronger, then the devil's just sitting there like, sorry, man. You know, like, I don't even know why I did that, you know. It's almost a slap to the face to him when you go out of a trial and you're like 10 times richer sometimes. You're like, and then you're like, I'm blessed even more than before you came at me, you know. So what I'm going to leave you with is just, in everything you do, especially with your finances, though, because this is a financial testimony, is because you just got to be faithful with your money. Pray about that seed that you plant. Don't let it go on the wayside. Don't just plant a seed and let it go, because if a farmer sows a seed and doesn't water it, doesn't pray about it, and doesn't put the work into it, it's just going to die. So put the work into your seed sowing, and you'll see a harvest. Totally. Amen.
Well, what happened first of all was I wrote out like 5 pages of notes, because if I was standing up here alone, I could just talk, but we got to go back and forth, so it was like, how are we going to do this? He didn't like my 5 pages. So then he typed out 4 pages. I didn't like them. So we wound up with these little outlines, and it says that I'm going to start by, well, first, happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Well, I was born in Utica in 1940. Hard to believe, I know, but I can't believe it myself. I had 2 parents who loved me, although my dad was an alcoholic, brought up Catholic, went to Catholic school. My fondest memory is getting my knuckles whacked by a ruler. Yeah. I guess because my dad was an alcoholic, I was what they call an escapee. So I became a wild teenager until about age 19, and that's when I met Joe Paratore.
That was the best time of her life.
Got married 9 months later, and first we lived in Syracuse, then I moved 19 times, so Syracuse, Canandaigua, Bristol, and that's where we had a little horse farm, and that's where we got in trouble. I hate to tell this part, but this is where I met someone who turned my head and turned my heart. And so I wound up being unfaithful to my husband, and that led to separation and divorce. And we were all together apart for 4 years. But for the last 2 of those years, I had gone back with him because the guy that I ran away with, well, that didn't work out either, you know. So here we are back together, and Joe bought a motorcycle shop. We lived upstairs over it. We were the biggest pot dealers in town, and I'm a new creature. I am a new creature. But we had some close calls with that marijuana because we had a freezer full, and you know we had sheriffs and troopers coming in buying motorcycle parts and stuff, and close calls with them. In fact, one night we woke up in the middle of the night and we could hear cops outside with a bullhorn yelling, "Come out with your hands up." We crawled on the floor over to the window, and we're peeking out, and I was about to yell, "Come and get me, you dirty coppers! You'll never take me alive." And then we realized that, oh, they weren't talking to us. The house next door had two teenagers who just, I don't know what they were doing. It was an abandoned house, but apparently they were worse than us. Well, while we were living in that apartment, I was working for a big communications company in Rochester. And one day, I had a terrible headache, and it probably was a hangover. But they told me, go find Mike in the drafting department. He'll give you an aspirin or a Tylenol or something. So I went and found Mike, and sure enough, he had the one drawer in his desk was like a drugstore. So he gave me something, and he asked me if I wanted to go for a cup of coffee. So we went for a cup of coffee, and I thought he was just going to be another guy on the make, but he started telling me about Jesus. Well, you know, I was brought up Catholic. I knew about Jesus, but this guy was talking like he knew Jesus personally. Well, I wound up having Bible studies with this guy right in the office. And here's a real scary thing. I remember at one point he asked me, "Did you ever ask Jesus to come into your heart?" And I said, "Oh, yes." What a lie. I had not. And then he invited me to church, and I was just not ready for church, you know. But when God starts working on somebody, he's working. So there was this farmer where I always stopped to buy fresh eggs, and you went up on his porch, and he had a refrigerator, and it was on the honor system. You got your eggs out of the refrigerator, and you put your money in the jar. And when you brought the egg carton home and opened it up, there was always a scripture written inside the lid. And I'd read it to him, stick it in the refrigerator, and forget about it. Well, one day my car broke down right in front of that farm. So I walked up his driveway and knocked on the door and asked if I could use the phone. And they said, sure. And they invited me in. They wanted me to have this big breakfast and everything. I was, no, I just want to use your phone. So he gave me a ride home. And all the while he was giving me a ride home, he's telling me about Jesus. Again, like someone who knows him personally. I got out of his pickup truck and he drove away, and I stood there thinking, wow, there goes another one. So this was like about a year later after these Bible studies with Mike. So now another year goes by, and we're still living up over the motorcycle shop. And there was this girl, a neighbor, who actually worked at Xerox with Joe. And she was worse than I. She was running around on her husband. She was doing drugs. She was leaving a little baby at home. She was a mess like I was. But all of a sudden, she was totally changed. she asked me to go for a walk with her, and she's wheeling her baby in the baby carriage, and we're walking down the street, and she's telling me about Jesus. And I thought, wow, another one. So yeah, they are. This was 1975, so God was really moving all over the place then. I didn't know it, but, I was finding out later. Anyway, Judy invited us over for dinner, and I thought, well, she's going to just be shoving Jesus down my throat, but I'll just agree with everything she says and get out of there as fast as I can. So we went over for dinner. Her husband was a barber. He had to get back to his barber shop. Joe had to get back to his motorcycle shop, and that left Judy and I doing the dishes and her shoving Jesus down my throat. But something happened that night, and I guess the Lord opened my ears, because all of a sudden I didn't want to get out of there. I wound up staying till midnight. I had a lot of questions, and I wound up telling her I would go to church with her that Sunday. This was a Thursday night. So I went home, and I went up into this dark apartment. Joe was still downstairs working on a bike, and I didn't see any blinding flash of light or anything, but I knelt down in the middle of that dark living room, and I said, Jesus, if you're real, that's how much faith I had. If you're real, I'm asking you, come into my heart, come into my life like Judy told me. So Joe came up, and I said, I'm going to go to church with Judy Sunday. Do you want to go? Well, what are you kidding? It's the only time I get to work on my bike. So by the grace of God, I didn't say another word to him. And lo and behold, Sunday morning, I get up. I'm getting ready for church. He gets up, and he gets ready for church. So Judy comes to get us, and of course we assume we're going to a Catholic church. But no, we wind up at a Baptist church. It was like, what? So anyway, I didn't know that anything much had happened to me that Thursday night until, that kind of a church, they have like a little thing up on the wall, tells you what songs they're going to sing that morning. So the first, the first song they sang was an old hymn. Maybe some of you might know it. The words go, open my eyes that I might see wonderful things in thy law. Well, when that music started, I was a mess. That's when I knew something was really different about me. And that's when the Lord just started changing me totally, irrevocably, and wonderfully from that day on. Those songs tonight, talking about God's love and God's finding us, oh my gosh, He is so powerful and so faithful. And we are all blessed if we know Him. We are all blessed. Well, in the meantime, like I said, 1975, God was doing a lot of stuff all over the world. He was working in Joe Paratore, too. So I'm going to let Joe tell you about his end of it.
About the same time that what was his name? Mike was witnessing to Barbara. I worked at Xerox, and I had sitting next to me over here was the president of the Full Gospel Businessmen, and sitting behind me was one of the members. So I got this constant, because he knew that we were living back together and not married. And he said, when are you going to make an honest woman out there? And I said, I already married once. Ain't that enough? And I said, besides, doesn't it say, what God has put together, let no man put us under? He says, yeah, it also says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. So I already ran out of all the scriptures I knew. So at the same time, I had a Jehovah's Witness come after me. And I don't know if you've ever heard of John Bircher Society, but he was after me. So I had these three guys that I had, I couldn't walk anywhere without running into one of them. And anyway, one night this friend of mine says, hey, let's go to the movies. And I said, okay, where do you want to go? He said, let's go see Jesus Christ Superstar. And I said, all right. So we got stoned and we went to see Jesus. And we were sitting there. We were sitting there looking, and I'm going. All of a sudden, there was a scene, and it was a scene. I can't exactly remember what it was. They were kind of flocking all around Jesus, and all of a sudden, I looked at him and I said, "Wow, he was real." And something started working in my heart, and I'm going, "What's going on?" So the next morning, I went in and I went to Jimmy, the president, and I said, "Jimmy, something happened to me last night." He says, "What?" I said, "I went to see Jesus Christ Superstar." He says, "It wasn't scriptural." I said, "Jimmy, I don't know scripture." I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll go again with you tonight, and I'll go straight, and we'll go see it." Jimmy was from the old Assembly of God church, and they didn't go to movies, they didn't dance, they didn't do this, nothing. So he said, "I want you to talk to this friend of mine." And I said, "Jimmy," I said, "I don't trust anybody. I don't want to talk to him." He says, "Please talk to this friend of mine." His name was Larry Black. Larry Black was a DJ on a big rock station in Rochester. Larry Black was white, and there was another guy, his name was Larry White, and he was black. And they were both DJs on the same thing. Anyway. So as Barb told you, we had a motorcycle shop, and I had all these guys used to come in, and they want their helmets and their gas tank painted with stars and stripes. So and every time they did, I kind of labeled them as Captain America. So I called up Larry, and he said, "I'll meet you over to Don and Bob's hamburger place. It's a huge, huge hamburger place." So I said, "Well, how do I know you?" He says, "It's easy." And he says, "I got a Volkswagen. It's painted red, white, and blue." And I said, "Captain America." So I went. We sat there, and I thought I was going to tell him about me. Instead, he told me all about him. He witnessed to me about his life. He was a son of a preacher, pastor. And he told me all about it. And he told me about a place called Love-In. Love-In's in Ithaca. That's INN. And how it started was there's a guy by the name of Scott Ross, who you might have heard of. He's works for Pat Robertson on 700 Club. He interviews all celebrities. But he was in charge of the radio station in Ithaca. And a woman called him up one night and says, "I got a barn for you and 30 acres of land." And he goes, "Right, what am I going to do with that?" So he walked into the barn and stood there at night, and the Lord showed him a vision of all these colors and a lot of young people. So he started talking about it on his show about having people coming in weekends at like a halfway house for alcoholics or whatever you had. And finally he turned it into a church. They cleaned the barn all up, made the church into a barn. It's still there. It's right on Route 13, just outside of Ithaca. And all these people started coming now and staying instead of just coming for the weekend. So Larry told me about that, and I said, well, I told Barbara, I said, let's go down there just to see what it's like. Now, I hadn't accepted the Lord yet. So we went down, and I listened to Scott preach, and I was impressed. He talked about a shepherd's convention of 1,500 men getting together and talking about Jesus. And I'm going, yeah, right, you know. And anyway, something happened to me that night. We went home, and I was sitting there on the couch, and all I could think about is what he said, and about Jesus Christ Superstar, and like that. Now, I was a pretty hard dude. I started crying uncontrollably. I was wailing, and all I could say is that I want Jesus. And we ended up quitting our jobs. We moved to Ithaca to be part of Lovin'. And we were there for 4 years?
4 years altogether.
4 years. And something wonderful happened to us while we were there.
When we were there for 3 years, we had been married, divorced, and married again, and altogether it was 19 years. Well, one day he came home and he said, Ted, that was our pastor at the time, assistant pastor. Scott was still there. He said, Ted wanted to talk to me today. I said, what did he want? He said, well, you better sit down. So I sat down. He said, Ted said that there's going to be a baby born to an unwed mother, and it was going to be up for adoption, and we were the first couple they thought of. He said, what do you think? And I said, let's go for it. And he said, go for it? He said, aren't you going to pray about it? I said, I already have been. Because what had happened to me was a few weeks ago, an older woman, well, she's probably older than I am now, or I'm older than she was then, but she was asking me about Christmas, and I was telling her, well, it's just Joe and I, so we always go up to Utica to be with family. And she said, have you ever thought about adopting? And I said, no, not really. And she said, you ought to pray about it. And inside me I went, mind your own business, you old biddy. But just being honest. I went home that night, and I prayed some kind of little half-hearted prayer, and I kind of forgot about it. But a couple of nights later, I prayed a second time, again, a half-hearted prayer, and I just kind of forgot about it. But a couple of nights after that, I prayed a third time, and that time it was a very specific prayer that I will never forget. Because that night I said, Lord, if you want us to have a child, I said, somehow you pick the child and put it in our lives so I'll always know this is the child you gave us. So, when you hear the rest of the story, you'll know how important that prayer was and how much it meant. Well, that baby was going to be born in how many weeks?
4 weeks.
Yeah, most people got 9 months to prepare. I had 4 weeks, and I changed one diaper my entire life. I didn't have any idea what a baby needed or anything. All the women in that church got together and gave me this humongous shower that we didn't have to buy anything for a baby. The only thing we bought, in fact, his family, there'd been no babies born in 17 years because all his cousins grew up and they never got married. So we had all this stuff, and then the day came when they were going to bring this baby to us. The little boy was coming from Albion, New York, about 2 hours away. 3 hours away. I was so nervous. Right away, he wants to cook him a big dinner. So, okay. What I wanted to do was be able to just boil some water so I could make a bottle for the kid, you know. So they got there, the assistant pastor and his wife from our church and this other couple from the other church who were bringing Mark. He was 3 days old when we got him. This would have been Mark's 38th birthday. He was born on Valentine's Day. So they brought him in, and here, it's February. He was all bundled up, and they put him in my arms. I had no idea. I just kept holding him like that, all bundled up with blanket and snowsuit, and he was turning beet red. So the lady says, well, maybe we should, unbundle him and everything. So everybody from our church kept coming in to see him and visit and wish us well. So it was about 10 o'clock that night when finally everybody was gone, and it was just Joe Paratore and me and this little baby. So I took him upstairs to, change a diaper and put some pajamas on him and everything. But and Joe was sitting downstairs in the living room. When I came down the stairs with Mark in my arms, I stopped on the landing, and his family nickname is Pepper. And I said, Pepper. He said, what? I said, I love him. Because I had been worried, why are you going to all of a sudden love this little stranger that comes into your house, I had no idea, but it happened. So we stayed there down near Lovin, outside of Ithaca, for almost another year, and then they were going to start the church plant up in Syracuse, so they wanted us to be a part of that. So we moved back up to Syracuse. Let me see, yeah. You can tell about Mark, your experience with Mark,
What she was referring to is that I had my doubts about adopting. I said, I'm too old. I said, I'm too set in my ways. I said, I don't know if I could love somebody who is, as soon as they brought him in, that went away. I was praying one morning, and I was praying to God, what do you want me to do? Are you sure this is what you want me to do, and like that? And I told him, I'm too old, I'm do this. And I almost heard it audibly, and he said, you haven't got one excuse. That's so I'd go to work in the morning, and I couldn't wait to get home at night. I mean, I would break speed limits just to get home. And then we ended up moving to Syracuse, became part of the new church, which didn't work out. So we left and went to another church. And it was a brand new church, and I said, nice brand new church, because I was in construction, and I was always doing work down at the other church. We were there for about 3 months. The pastor come up to me, and he said, how'd you like to build our new church? So I said, okay, I did. We built it, and then he said, we've just finished it. He said, how would you like to build another one? And I said, why not? I said, where? He said, Kenya. I said, can I what? He said, he says, no, Kenya, Africa. I said, you want me to go to Kenya to build a church? He says, yeah. I said, I was working at General Electric, so I went and saw my boss. My boss and I were old friends. I had worked there before. And I said, Bob, I want to take a leave of absence for 6 months. He says, where are you going? I said, I got to go to Africa to build a church. He goes, let's go see the boss. So we go see the boss, and the boss says, Bob, get the paperwork, take it around. I want to get it signed today. I guess we're going. So we went to Africa, but instead of spending 6 months, we only spent 3.5 months. And I don't know, we're kind of running out of time.
Okay, I'm going to have to skip a lot of what I got in here, because, boy, we've been around a long time. We could talk for another hour. So I'm gonna just kind of try to make the rest of it fast. We had a great time in Africa. Mark was 4 years old. He turned 5 there. He was a wonderful little boy. There were no terrible twos. He saved that for when he was a teenager. And then he went to college, and he met Terry, and he really wanted to impress her, so he really straightened out. They got married after college, and everything was going great. He was on his way to being a millionaire, and they were living right on top of the hog. New house, new cars, new boat. Wonderful. But then 2000 2009. Yeah. It was like the bottom fell out of the economy, and they started losing everything. Well, Mark, instead of turning to the Lord like we taught him, like we would have hoped, he turned to the bottle. And literally, he did not drink liquor out of glasses. He drank it out of the bottle. And we are in Binghamton. He's in Georgia. And they just kept hiding all of it from us. So we didn't know that all this was going on until it was too late. So finally, we were going down there on a Friday with plans to bring him back to Binghamton. We were going to get him some help, get him into rehab. We got there late Friday afternoon. Terry had left him. You know, my dad was an alcoholic, like I said, so I almost didn't blame her, but she did keep checking on him. Well, when we got to the house, it was horrible. He had destroyed all his organs in a year and a half. It's amazing how people drink all their lives and don't do what he did in a year and a half. But when you call 911, if they try to come and get you and you're not willing to go, they just have to leave. But he was so bad off that day, when they came, they just took him. They took him to the hospital, and we followed in a car. And we were there till about 10 o'clock that night, and you know, he's all hooked up on a machine. And the doctor came out and said, we might as well go home, and if anything changes, we'll call you. But it looks like he's stabilized. He's going to be able to go home in the morning. But we got a call at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was totally changed. And Mark died that day. This church, this pastor, and that pastor's wife, everyone was praying for us. And all I can say, to find out how amazing God's grace is, to go through that, God's grace truly is amazing. He saw us through in ways I can't even explain. He was always there. I couldn't even get rid of him. He was just there all the time, you know. So anyway, today would have been his 38th birthday. The wonderful thing is God assured us we know where he is. God used Pastor Chris to assure us. He used other people to give us words of knowledge. We know where he is. That's all that matters. But you see how that prayer all those years ago, I always will know that is the child that God sent no matter what. So then Joe went through a bunch of stuff with triple heart surgery and all kinds of attacks from the enemy physically. Again, the church just prayed and saw us through. And here we are today. We're just still covered by God's grace and his faithfulness and his power. And those songs we sang, thank you, Aaron, those songs we sang tonight, oh my gosh. So we serve a wonderful God, and we love this church, and we love all of you. We thank you for listening to us.
Why am I going last? Wow. Hi, Savannah. You want to help me?
I want Sissy.
Oh, you want Sissy? You want to go get Mommy?
I want Sissy.
Okay, she's going to hang out here. So I'm going to wrap us up tonight. I'll try to be quick. Pastor asked me to do a special summary on Valentine's Day. There's Sissy. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, you know, what an honor to speak about the day of days, Valentine's Day, the one day a year when we're supposed to show our love above all other days, above birthdays and marriage days and Christmas days. This is the day that really has the exclamation mark. And I started to think, like, wow, this is going to be like getting a lot of amens and claps, because all the couples that are so grounded and confident and clear, they're going to say, honey, we don't have to go to dinner tonight. Let's go to church and have chili. And it's going to be just like this. And I started preparing and thinking, like, wow, this is going to be easy street. And then I started thinking, what about the other guys that I forgot to make a reservation? And, honey, just didn't want to miss the chili. We're going to be there. So we're going to have a little bit of a mixed crowd. So there's some of you here that are married. There's some of you here that are dating. There's some of you here that are engaged. Regardless of who you are, you definitely want to hear the pages from Barbara's notebook that she didn't get to read tonight. And I have the chance tonight to close us out with a little bit of my favorite things about Valentine's Day. Big hearts. Next slide. One more. So I figured we'd go through the top 10 things people love or don't love about Valentine's Day. And just by means of introduction, there is a little bit of an honorable mention for things that didn't make this list. If you really start to look at some of the most interesting Valentine's Day cards that are out there, there's some really good ones. I like you more than Kanye likes Kanye. I mean, there's just some really solid Valentine's Day cards out there. Your name must be Grace, because you're so amazing. So that's the warm-up. Those are the ones that didn't quite make the cut. Top 10 things you love or don't love about Valentine's Day. Number 10, today is Valentine's Day, or as men like to call it, Extortion Day. You gotta do it. You gotta do it. Number 9, this is for the single people out there. Question, do you have a date for Valentine's Day? Answer, yes, February 14th. Okay. Hashtag single life. There's a really popular writer, Jules Renard, number 8. He describes love is like an hourglass, with the heart filling up as the brain empties. Ouch. So we do a lot of translations in our church. We have the Mirror Translation, the New Living Translation, the Amplified Translation. There's all sorts of biblical translations, and I thought, gosh, they don't really do this for Valentine's Day. So number 7, this is from James. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? And the Valentine's Day translation would say, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you are in love, but don't show it by purchasing chocolates? Can that kind of love save anyone? All right. Number 6, we just have to really admit who the true winner is here today. The florist. Yeah. It's career choices. It's all about those flowers today. So we're going to take number 5 in pieces. Number 5, again, this would have been great for Mark and Amy's game. What he said, your neck is as beautiful as an ivory tower. Your eyes they're like the sparkling pools in Heshpan by the gate of Bath Rabimim. Your nose is as fine as the Tower of Lebanon, overlooking Damascus. What she heard? You have a big nose. Number 4, a lot of this millennial online dating stuff is out there. So I looked at some stats. Almost 60% of millennials consider online dating a good way to meet people. 20% of them need to ask for help in how to do this. And only 5% of actual committed relationships report meeting online. I'm glad I'm not a millennial. It doesn't seem to be working. Okay, this one, number 3, one of the worst Valentine's Day cards I think you could ever give. I'd love you even if you were so ugly that everyone died. Poor expressions of love. Number 2, you guys are all here tonight. Pastor Chris has officially fulfilled his master plan of having the church attend a service on Valentine's Day night and also having a chili bake-off. Hashtag beans. They're good for your heart. You're welcome, Marge. And the real number 1 reason we just absolutely love Valentine's Day, discounted chocolate starts tomorrow, February 15th, at a store near you. So everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight.